Welcome to Unstuck by Nicole, a little perspective in your pocket to help you think differently, lead differently, and hopefully get unstuck from whatever is keeping you where you are. Today's episode focuses on the concept why knowing isn't doing, and a conversation about a gap between awareness and action. Many people know exactly what they need to do to reach their goals or their desired state, yet months and years can pass between knowing and doing. Now, in this conversation, we're going to explore why awareness alone rarely creates change and what keeps people stuck even when they know better. Now, I'm really, really excited today because we have a guest with us, and it is somebody who has spent decades helping people bridge the gap between knowing and what they need to do to actually do it. Now, Ricky is the founder of Raising Your Game and works with individuals, leaders, and organizations to create meaningful behavioral change through coaching, consultancy, and training. Hello, Ricky.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say, what I admire most about your work, Ricky, is how you focus on practical transformation.
Yeah.
And it's not just simply helping people understand themselves better, but it's actually helping them take action on what they already know.
And that's key.
It's really key, right? We all know, I think, as humans, we know what we need to do, but it's actually pushing ourselves to do it and understanding more about what prevents us from doing so. Now, you do a lot of this in your day-to-day work.
I do.
Is this something that you see quite frequently being a challenge for many people?
Yes. And the reason being is most people can tell you why something is happening or not happening. And then you have that gap between the understanding that information and the application, the doing, the shift in behavior, and that missing piece. And that's the bit that some people can become stuck with. Some people start the process and then stop the process, and they feel like they've got all the information, yet they can't stick to the behavioral change. And that's the bit that I work with, whether that be individuals, whether that be, leaders, managers, or organizations shifting the culture.
Yeah, so people almost become marginally obsessed with learning. It's like a safety blanket.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, how much more can I learn? How much more can I consume? How much insight can I gather? How much analysis can I do on myself? That type of thing. And you'll find a lot of people, and I use that quite generically, but you find a lot of people go on a personal development journey to try and consume as much as they can in the hope that they'll find something that's going to create the behavioral shift. And what you tend to find is if you have so much information, it can cause the opposite.
Yeah.
So that's the piece that we need to break down and understand what is the most valuable piece and how can we move forward with what's most important.
It's like action fatigue almost. It's like preventing yourself from doing that. You're just getting safety in learning. Yeah, I see that quite a lot. And actually, I have to say, there was a really lovely quote on your website, which I'm marginally obsessed with. And it says, to make personal development as important to humans as oxygen is to life. Can you tell us a bit more about why you have that on there, what that means to you?
Two reasons. One is we are always learning. And if we think about breathing, we're always breathing.
Yeah.
So if we take the analogy of breath work as an example, or breathing in itself, and then relate that to personal development, we should never stop breathing. So we should never stop learning.
Yeah.
And you can go into deep work around breath work as well, as we know, and how we breathe and how it makes a difference. And the same applies to personal development. We can do so much with it. It's how you use your learning and your development. Such as working with somebody that you disagree with, you can always learn from them. Even if you don't, fully agree with what they're saying, you can find something to learn from them. So I have that on there because it's a good reminder. And then the second point being my company name. So you have Raise Your Game versus Raising Your Game. If you think of raising, you're thinking, okay, well, that's a continuous journey.
Yeah.
You're never ending. And that's the key behind the creating Raising Your Game as a brand name.
Yeah.
And it sticks.
Well, we love a cycle of continuous improvement, don't we? It's what we both love doing. And I think, that what we're going to focus on today is we're going to explore why that insight doesn't always lead to action and what keeps people stuck really long after they've recognized what they want to do. We spoke about this before. We've seen this many times where we know we work with individuals, teams, companies, they all have these big goals. They want to make changes. It could be behavioural, it could be something more specific. But you go back and they're still in the same place and they're really, really stuck. So we're going to go through how we begin to close the gap between intention and behaviour. And you also, on your website, again, another quote I adore is that you invite everyone to think well and become an action addict.
Yes.
So I feel like this is a really great conversation to have with you today.
It will be.
It will be.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love that. You suggested, embedded suggestion that you just said there. It's going to happen. Okay. So just take a second to take a step back. I think so many people who will be watching this will be able to relate and connect with the fact that they have a goal, a desire, or a dream that they would like to achieve. And they've probably been speaking about this for quite some time. So let's have a little second to think about this kind of awareness trap, which I think we could probably label it as. So why doesn't awareness automatically create change in a human?
So if we think about awareness in itself, it's a great part of personal development. Actually, it's the first pillar, if you think about it, is being more aware.
Yeah.
The idea of awareness is to give us some information, to give us some insights. That alone won't create change. The only thing that's going to create change is a shift in behavior. And one of the things that you might hear a lot of people saying is, I know. That phrase, I know. And the second somebody says, I know, it's almost like, well, don't tell me anymore. I know what I need to do. And your point a little bit, a moment ago was around, they get this idea in their head and then you come back a month later, a year later, whatever it might be, and they're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So they're aware of what they need to do. And it's finding that I suppose that catalyst that's in between that says, okay, how do I start to take action? And that's where we have to define, how do we use awareness to create action and transformation and change? Or otherwise it becomes something that's going to cause rumination or the overthinking. And then that directly, I suppose, either appeals to our identity or we create an environment that supports that way of thinking and behaving. And that keeps us in the same place. So going back to the awareness point is to say, well, is that a safety mechanism that we're using? Because if it is, you won't change. There won't be a difference in 3 months, 6 months time. And we overcomplicate what we think we can do. And sometimes what we need to do is just bring it back to a very simple habit, a very simple pattern interrupt, a very simple action that we can take in the moment, knowing where we want to go.
So you just mentioned the word pattern interrupt, and I love that. I know about that. But for people who don't understand what you mean when you say pattern interrupt, could you explain what that could look like or sound like?
So if we think about habits, we're all very aware of the type of habits that we have. So somebody might say something like, I am a procrastinator. And they say that's a habit of mine that I do very often. So that pattern that they're running is often what they notice. And what we do with that pattern is recognize it and say, okay, how do I interrupt the pattern? How do I shift the behavior so I get a better response? So if somebody wanted to look it up, you could look up, stimulus response theory as an example. The stimulus being, what you notice around you in the environment or internally in your own environment as little triggers. So those triggers that you have begin the pattern that you've got. And what we're looking to do is in the space between the trigger, the stimuli and the response is break the pattern if it's not serving you well.
Perfect.
So that's the piece when I say pattern interrupt, is to say, recognize your patterns. That's great. That's good awareness. And that pattern interrupt allows us to shift behavior towards our goals or our plans or whatever it might be.
I have so many conversations with many friends about this, and they often say, I just need to get going. I just need to get there with it. And once I get going, I'll be fine. And then I'll see them like a year later, and the same conversation will be coming up. And it's just really interesting. People have that awareness, but yet they can't quite get through that pattern interrupts. It's something that they just haven't quite figured out yet.
And that's an example of language. So even saying to ourselves in that moment, as you use as an example, which was, I need to do that. I need to get going. The word need as an example is what we call a modal operator. What we're saying is that, does it push and pull us towards what we want to do?
Yeah.
And again, it goes to that I know what I need to do. I need to do this. And the second you say, I should do this, I could do this, I need to do this, I ought to do this, those type of statements, you're actually taking away the accountability and decision making from yourself to others.
Right.
Who says you need to do that? Who says you should do that? And the second you start to do that, you can almost take away accountability from yourself to take some form of action.
Don't we love that?
Yeah.
Gives us a reason to not do what we want to do, right? Yeah.
And then we have the push and pull of, whether it's pain or pleasure, what motivates us. And there's many different things we can talk about how to get through that.
I think you just actually answered one of my questions, because one thing I really wanted to understand is, can self-awareness sometimes become a form of avoidance?
Yes.
Literally, it's probably the biggest thing that is the reason why people avoid change.
Yeah, it's a great sort of quote that I got taught, you could say, many, many years ago, which was, to read one book is great, but it doesn't offer you many options.
Yeah.
To read 2 books gives you options. If you start to read 50 books, you have way too many options. You begin to procrastinate. So you're looking at trying to find enough information to start taking action. So another good example of that is, you might find people who read book after book, attend course after course. And my response to that is, go read one chapter and take the learning from it and take action on it, rather than read the whole book, feel good about reading the whole book and never do anything with it.
Now, so I think we've got an idea now around this awareness trap and what that could look like for people. So if anyone is listening and they're currently sat there and reflecting, going, gosh, I have told myself over the past couple of years, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z, yet I still haven't done it. I think it's probably fair to say they're currently in this awareness trap at the moment. But by the end of this session today, they're going to walk away and they'll start taking action, which would be really great. So let's just take the next step forward and start thinking about why we actually stay stuck.
Sure.
What are some of the most common reasons that people struggle to act on what they already know?
Yeah, good question. There's a couple of reasons here. So if you think about the first reason and the most important point that you'll recognize when people are stuck is safety. I think, people do have clarity sometimes as to what they want to do. Some people have really good high levels of confidence about what they want to do. They also have high levels of capability and competence to do what they want to do. Yet what they find is that they feel safe where they are. And that could be a number of reasons. One, it could be their identity is being challenged.
Yeah.
So who I am I the person deserving of this success? So if we start to grow above and beyond our identity, we're stretching our identity. So then we create something called, parts conflict. So there's a part of me that says, I want to do this and I know I'm good at it. And the other part says, actually, no, you're safe here. And the safety is more, from an emotional perspective, more appealing because it's not uncomfortable. So you have the identity piece. Then we have things like our belief systems, which, our beliefs and our values form our identity. So it's the expectations we have of ourselves, of others, and everybody around us. And if we take that point about everybody around us, it's the environment. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who are pushing you and challenging you and saying, okay, you can do this, and holding you accountable almost, you might start to make some progress with that. Whereas if you've got an environment where people are saying, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay, it'll happen in its own time. Sit back, the stars will align when they're going to align for you. Yes, it can happen for some people.
Yeah.
Most often than not, you've got to be the one who takes that. So when you're thinking about being stuck, you're asking yourself, how would I, feel? How would I talk to myself from an internal dialogue perspective? How will I perceive my identity in a year's time if I don't do nothing?
Oh, that's painful to me.
Right.
That hits hard, thinking in a year's time, reflecting, going, I am still in the same place. One of my the biggest fear I think I have in my life is not achieving what I can achieve.
Right.
It's a huge driver for me. And sometimes it's too driven.
Yeah.
But it's something that I definitely relate to. So when you just said that one, in a year's time, what if I've not taken a step forward with this? That hits me really hard.
Right.
So that's a really good question that people could ask themselves.
It is.
Okay.
And there's reframes to that as well, which is, what would happen when you achieve this?
Yeah.
Because if you're asking yourself, how would I feel if I don't achieve this in a year's time? You're almost playing out that scenario. It's a bit like a golfer, really. A golfer doesn't go on a golf course to try and just, get the ball on the green, as an example. Their aim is to get a hole in one.
Yeah.
They're focusing on that.
Yeah.
So it's not what would happen if I don't get a hole in one. It's like, what will happen when I get a hole in one? And it gets them closer. It's a bit like the goals that we set for ourselves. It's making sure that we fully do believe that we deserve that success. So that's that piece around the identity, that conflict that we have. And do we feel that we deserve that success? Do I believe that I can be the person that can grow into the behaviors and the actions and the decisions that get me to that success? And most often than not, the goal is never the goal. There's something beyond that anyway.
You just said something really interesting. And I see this almost every time I'm coaching somebody, and that's the word of like deserving. Do I feel like I deserve this?
Yeah.
How, and this is a question which it's a tough question to ask and answer.
Sure.
How would somebody be able to sit here today listening to this and check in with themselves to understand, am I preventing myself moving forward because I believe I don't deserve it? Is there something they would be able to hear in their head or feel in their body when they ask that question to self, to give them some guidance on, is this the thing that's holding me back? Is this a self-worth concern?
So again, whether you deserve something, if you're listening in as an example to this and you're asking yourself, do I deserve it? That's a reflection of how you perceive yourself from an identity level, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying to yourself, do I personally deserve this success? And the second you start to challenge that and say to yourself, I'm not sure whether I deserve it. And that starts to feed into the evidence piece around what you're doing. Because if let's say you do something and it goes really well, and you don't get the congratulations or the people around you patting you on the back to say, well done, then you feel like, do I deserve that? Do I deserve that?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not for me. And that's where, trusting the process, being very disciplined. If you take sports people as an example, they're very disciplined, and, somebody might say you don't deserve that, but for them as a human who wants success, they say, I deserve this. So they're the ones who are driving that, irrespective of judgment from other people.
And that's where it really often comes in from, isn't it? Judgment. I think it's more the fear of judgment. I think some people truly believe they do deserve to reach their goals, but get fearful of the judgment of others.
Yeah.
And that's a different layer of identity crisis that could be occurring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot people could be unpicking when they're not achieving their goals. But I think, the thing that you said earlier on, what would it be like in a year if you hadn't achieved it? For me, is one of the most successful questions to ask myself in overcoming and changing my behavior.
Yeah.
And I think it's for people to figure out, what are those questions or those things that you can do to check in and almost, give you a little bit of a kick at the bum to just go, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to be brave.
And that's the key there. So when we talk about this self-awareness, knowing what you need to do, feeling that you deserve it or don't deserve it, it's coming back to taking action.
Yeah.
It's doing something, and it doesn't have to be big action. I think this is the part that most people start to say to themselves, that in order for me to achieve that goal or that desired outcome, as an example, I have to do so much.
Yeah.
I have to create massive change. And the idea is about shifting habits, about finding something very small that you can start to do and repeating that over and over again.
Okay.
And that will start the process of shifting the behaviors, making you feel like you deserve it. And even the narrative that we share in our own mind. So we talk about internal dialogue. Now, I always say your thoughts are suggestions. They're not real. And that can play on people's minds, that statement in itself.
Yeah.
They are suggestions. And what that allows you to do, if you step back and you think to yourself, if I was to put these thoughts on a piece of paper or use it like a video printer and let it scroll across me and then pick out and choose the ones that I would choose to accept or reject, then I can start to make better decisions about the direction I want to go, and based upon that internal dialogue, because it's a suggestion to yourself and it's coming from you. So those internal dialogue conversations that you're having are born through you based upon the environment and your experience through life.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is say, well, the internal dialogue is simply trying to protect me. And that goes back to the safety piece. It's just protecting me. And that's okay. Let's listen to it. Yeah, what could we do if we, shifted the questions we ask ourselves? Goes back to the point of what would happen if I did do this rather than what would happen if I didn't do this, as an example. So it's thinking about that as well. That will help you make the changes in a small way. And another point on this, which you might hear other people say, oh, you've changed a lot.
Yes.
And what we know is, yes, it might appear like we've changed a lot to another person, even if they've only seen you a week later or a month later, whatever it might be, you know that you've been working on it every single day. So even if it was the internal dialogue that says, I'm only going to seek the positive in conversations, I'm going to be grateful for what I do have rather than what I don't have. I'm going to be aware and thank myself for taking one small action every day. And it's okay if I don't do it for one day, as long as I continue to get back on track and go again. Bounce back ability, if you want to call it that.
I love that word.
Yeah. And that will allow us to then start to break the patterns and form new neural pathways, as they call it, in order to create that change.
How much of our behavior is actually driven by our identity?
The majority of it.
Okay.
Yeah, the majority of it. So if we think about who we believe we are, that will create the resultant behavior. So it goes back to some of the points that we've been making already. And you have two schools of thought on this. You have somebody who says you are not your identity. And then you have somebody who says you are not your behavior. And everything is context dependent. And what we need to understand in that situation is actually your identity is driven by your behavior. Now, in order for you to create change, and if you think identity at the top of a pyramid, you can keep saying to yourself, I am this person. I'm a great decision maker. I'm an action addict. You can say all of these great statements that, form an identity. Yet if the behavior doesn't align to it, the identity just becomes more like an ego. Maybe to some degree an arrogance, which is, replacing confidence. And what we want to do is use behavior to drive and support and give evidence to the identity. So if you wanted to shift who you are, we have to shift the behavior. Yes.
Yeah, I love this because I think, one of my more recent articles, I was referring to, the concept of manifestation to a degree, that people use it to help drive and move them forward. And I love it. I think it's great. However, it's not the only piece of the puzzle. Like, you can't just think your way into a situation that you want. You need to have the underpinning values, behaviors, identity. And that takes a bit more deeper consideration and potentially reflection work to see, am I aligning with, I'm getting up each day saying, I am this, I am that, which is great because you're going to help give yourself the directive of where to go. But if you're then not matching that with your state, you're not going to get the success that you're looking for. And then you just maybe give up on the concept entirely.
For sure. And that brings 2 points. So one is values, which sits aligned to beliefs. So what's most important? So if your beliefs are set in a certain way, yet they don't align to your values, then there's a contradiction. And that's what also contradicts not only just your identity, but then the subtle shift of how you apply behaviors on a daily basis. Because are you prioritizing towards what it is that you really feel is most important? And that's the disparity that you can create. So there is that piece. And the second point that you make there, which, is paramount to everything, and that is your state. So, I use the quote, and I have done for many years, over 20 years coaching people, all your communication is a reflection of your current state.
It's powerful.
So everything that you do, and when I say communication, I don't just mean how you verbally communicate. It's also about how you behave through that communication. So using that state to say, okay, am I emotionally regulating myself to align, to use your words, with my identity, what I believe, what's most important to me, whether it moves me in the direction of, the competency that I need to develop, and also, am I creating the environment, talking about pattern interrupt and, the stimulus response, the environment, does that support the state? So you can't think your way through it.
No.
If we could, we'd all be, perfect Homo sapiens.
Yeah, correct.
It's about, okay, how do we make sure that our state aligns? And that's where congruency is so important.
Love it. This is just so interesting, I think, because there is so much more just to, I want to achieve this.
Yeah.
You have to be it, become it, believe it,
Yes.
integrate it. And it can feel like hard work to some people, but as you mentioned a couple of times, it's just start small, but be consistent.
Yeah.
I think I know historically I have in the past, when I've decided I want to try and achieve a goal, I go hard.
Right.
And then sometimes it doesn't quite pan out. And I think it's because I lack the consistency and I go full speed ahead instead. And actually, that's the piece that we need, isn't it? For behavioral change,
Yeah.
it's consistent action
Yeah.
to be integrated.
Absolutely.
You can't just change your behavior for a week and
No.
think, there we go, I'm done, new identity. It's a consistent action of this.
Yeah. And that's where discipline beats motivation, when motivation doesn't work. Right. I think for those listening now, we've got the World Cup going on. I think there's a video that's going out with Haaland on a spin bike. And he says, do I like doing this? No.
Oh, wow.
And he says, of course I don't like doing this.
Yeah.
And if you speak to, any professional athlete, they will talk to you about how discipline will beat motivation, because you don't want to get up.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to the gym every day, as an example. You might think, oh, do you know what? I don't feel motivated, but motivation will come afterwards. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Stick to the discipline. Find what it is that's most important to you and go all in with that discipline, even if you're not getting the results. So what you just said, which I think is really important, is even if you went in hard and you got to a certain point and it didn't work out, the fact that you tried, you can find out and learn a lot about yourself through that process.
Sure.
And that's more important than thinking about what you might do.
That's interesting. So it's even the reflection of the learn, and even if it's a failure, it's what you take away from that can actually help.
Yeah. So fail fast, right? As they say.
Fail fast.
Fail fast.
And do we change our behavior first or our identity first?
Behavior.
Okay.
Yeah, if I was to answer it that way, it'd be behavior.
And how would you tell the difference between the two?
Well, identity is an internal process, right? So if you think of it internally and externally, to simplify it, identity is what we say we are, who we are, what others might say who we are. So, I'm a parent, I'm a neighbor, I'm a friend, or whatever it might be. It's that identity hat, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Whereas behavior is external. It's what you do, it's what you show.
Okay.
So it's like confidence. So confidence is like, I am confident, is an identity statement.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
So I am confident or I am not confident.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have behavior, which is doing it. So some people say, when does confidence come? Is it before or after? And confidence is a result of your behavior, of doing something over and over again. You don't become confident first, if that makes sense. It's a result of it. You could act as if you're confident, that if that drives you to a certain behavior. Most often than not, it's driving the behavior to develop the competence. Then you find that as a useful point of reference and evidence to support the identity. And what we also find in behavioral change is to say, just go and do it. It's like the Nike thing, just do it. It's to just go and do it, because what you're trying to do in that situation is get out there and almost prove to yourself, find evidence that contradicts the identity that's holding you back. And the second you find evidence, that identity starts to shift. So you're not your identity. If going back to a quote I mentioned earlier on, you're not your identity, because it's always evolving. You're not who you are today versus who you were maybe, a year, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be the person you are today in 5 years. That identity will shift. The timeframes can be even shorter on that as well.
So let's just think about the gap between intention and action.
Yes.
Okay, so there is a gap.
Yes.
So why do people wait until they feel ready?
Well, why do they? Well, even if we just say why, if we just take the word why, we know from psychology that the confirmation bias, as we know, will help us rationalize why we want to do something. So we'll find evidence all around us. So when we've got a feeling that we're trying to get to before we take action, we're asking ourselves why over and over again. Why should I do this? Well, I'm going to wait until this feeling arises. And that feeling might come from, high levels of consequence in terms of pain or pain point before we take action. Action. Think about weight loss as an example,
Yes.
right? So we can get to a point where we know we should be eating better, and we know our clothes are starting to feel a little bit tighter, yet we feel okay about it. And that feeling still hasn't driven us to take some form of shift in our behavior of our eating habits or our exercise habits. And then when that feeling becomes too intense,
yes,
and the pain becomes way too much, then it becomes a consequence. And we're now trying to avoid that pain, and we start to take action. It's almost like I'm doing it because it's just unbearable.
Yes.
Right. So if we look at it that way, that feeling is almost like we're waiting for the feeling before we take action. And when I say things like become an action addict, it's because what we're trying to say is you might not feel like going to the gym. Most often than not, when you finish the workout, you're like, this was great. Why don't I do this often?
Yes.
And it's because now the feeling has joined you. So it's almost like, well, why don't you forget the feeling for now? Take action, enjoy the action. And then if you want to label a certain feeling, an emotion behind it, do it. And that will allow you to start creating that behavioral shift, that habitual approach that you want to take on a daily basis that says, doesn't matter how I feel. I think somebody said to me many, many moons ago, which is your success doesn't care about how you feel.
Wow, that's hard hitting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because in order for you to achieve what you define as success, it's not bothered about how you feel, really. That success will come irrespective of whether you have a motivational driver that is an avoidance of pain, or you have a motivational driver that is the pursuit of pleasure. The success will come. So the feeling is almost like important, but not the be all and end all as to why you achieve success.
That's really interesting. I have never thought of it quite like that. And that is actually quite powerful in terms of making you reflect and consider how you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're waiting for.
Yeah.
Okay. And what roles do you think fear plays in keeping people stuck? Because we've mentioned this a little bit now. We've mentioned fear, it's an identity thing. And we said before that we think it can be a really huge driver in it. So what role does it really play? And how do you quieten the noise of fear? Is it possible to do that?
It is.
Okay.
I mean, there's lots here. I mean, fear is something to unpack. Dependent on the individual. So if we was to think about fear from a point of view of our discussion, is to say, well, you can look at fear and say, right, is it fear that's holding me back, or is it the avoidance of fear that's holding me back? So if you're, let's say, somebody who's in a workplace and you know that you want to develop your public speaking skills.
Yes.
Is it the fear of public speaking, or is it the avoidance of public speaking that's causing that level of fear? And that then stems to other areas, which is what happens if I make a mistake? What's my credibility going to be like? What will happen if people judge me? And that will create the label of fear. And then we have different approaches that we can take to fear. Because, I mean, if you want to use acronyms and you want to break the word down, you've probably heard this before. If we take the word fear and we break it down to, false evidence appearing real, it's because we're hallucinating what fear really is. It's not real in itself, depending on whether it's traumatic fear.
Yeah, so different. Yeah, absolutely.
The other side of that is making sure that actually, if you've never presented in public, yet you're fearful of public speaking, how do you know it's really fear?
It's a bit like earlier on, you were saying that your thoughts aren't real.
Yeah.
It's the same concept.
Yeah.
Fear, unless, as you mentioned, it's very specifically related to something that happened. It's not real, this type of fear.
Yeah.
It's just a suggestion from your mind.
Yeah, because if we think about our unconscious being, we can achieve way more than we perceive we can. So that if you think about your potential is limited by how we identify our thoughts around us, our identity, going back to that point.
Yeah.
So whatever we're saying to ourselves, we're creating a barrier, a set of boundaries around who we are. So your potential lives within that. And what we're trying to do is say, okay, if we was to trust our unconscious and say, I am more than what I currently perceive I am or believe I am, you can achieve more. And that's where, you go and do something when you're pushed to it. You're almost thrown in the deep end, a bit like a child being thrown in the swimming pool. I'm not suggesting it, but throwing a child in the deep end, and that child just goes, right, I need to survive and swim.
Yeah.
So that fear of water disappears, and it's like, oh, wow, look at me go. So that fear starts to, disintegrate, you could say. And that comes to the second part of the acronym. If you wanted to, find another one, is just to, face everything and rise, if you've heard that before.
Yeah, I love that one.
And that's like almost saying, well, it doesn't matter whether that's being presented in front of me. It's not real in the moment. I'm thinking about it, and 90% of what I think might happen never does. So just go and do it and see what happens. And if you've got that mindset of what we spoke about at the very beginning of always be learning, you take that and you go, right, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? And what will I do differently next time? Which is an element of developing a growth mindset, if you've heard of that.
So I'm going to have to ask this on behalf of all my friends with children, because I know they'll be thinking it and I'll be in trouble if I don't ask it while I'm with you. So we know that fear can play a huge part in causing a form of like identity crisis, which prevents people from, maybe achieving goals or reaching their success, whatever that looks like. And that can be formed somewhat from the environment that you grow up in. So for the parents who have the children who really want to help their children create the most resourceful form of like identity or the language that they're saying in their own head, what can parents do to actually help their children lean into a more resourceful identity framework? And you've got children yourself, so no pressure.
No, it's a good question.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think that's something that people would really care to hear.
So I've got an 18-year-old, a 16 and a 10-year-old.
My goodness.
So from that perspective, the one thing I would say straight away off the bat is allow them to make mistakes. And I think sometimes we use our own upbringing, our conditioning and our beliefs to then trickle into how we want to be as a parent to them. And what that means is that we might start to say, well, I know how to do this. This is how you should do it. This is what you need to do if you want to. And, some strategies are there and they work, and, that's what you want to instill within your children. At the same time, they need to learn how to become more resilient through their mistakes.
Okay.
So in order for them to do that, it's almost allowing them to make mistakes. The same goes for things like arguing. So if my boys are arguing with each other, it's okay for them to argue. There's nothing wrong with arguing, because it builds something else, which is like negotiation skills. It builds communication skills. It builds the ability to manage their state, as long as it doesn't become a slanging match and where they're swearing at each other, as an example. If they learn to be able to articulate their point and get their point across, then that means that they're developing the communication skills. So you are allowing that to happen. The other part that I would also say is, if we want to break the pattern of maybe how we're conditioned versus how we want them to be, let's say, conditioned, they've got to make their own mistakes and be their own person, is to then say, okay, if there is something they've done, let's say, wrong, is how do I respond to that?
Yes.
So if I raise my voice, they're going to learn to raise their voice. If I talk to them in a certain way, which is demeaning or maybe dampens their belief about who they are in terms of confidence and their identity, then I'm not really helping them. So I'm like saying, I want them to be successful. I want them to do really well. But the second they do something wrong, I scream and shout at them and they go into their shell and they say, well, actually, I can't do that. So now they're limiting themselves. And what we need to do is say, okay, how do I break the patterns? You're not your parents, whether they are great or not great, whether you've had the right upbringing or not the right upbringing, you could say, is you are you, and you have a choice about how you communicate and behave with your children. And that will help them create the foundations for them to move forward. And the question that I ask myself is more along the lines of not how I'm just treating my children, it's how are they going to then treat their children or, their grandchildren? What's the legacy that you want to leave? And it's like, well, if they could remain calm, remind themselves of what is right and wrong, be a good human being, all of those sort of, great traits, is to then allow them to continue to make mistakes, argue if they want to argue, but do it in a good way.
Yeah.
And support them as much as you can, even when they're trying something and it doesn't work.
And I actually think now, obviously I don't have children, so I don't have to have that conscious consideration on the weight of that responsibility. It's a big responsibility. And I just think, if parents are listening and they're reflecting, going, oh gosh, actually, when the children have been naughty, I have probably responded in an undesirable way. This goes back to that pattern interrupt that you were referring to earlier. And it's starting to not only have the awareness of you doing it, but then figuring out, what can I do to prevent my automatic unconscious response and instead bring in a different approach?
So breathe as a parent.
Breathe.
So breathe.
That's a good one.
And manage your state. Goes to that point about all your communication is a reflection of your current state. So in that moment, when you get triggered by something, is to recognize, how am I responding now? And if you can manage that state, even if it's to take a couple of deep breaths in that moment and then think, what's my desired outcome? What do I want from this? And if it's, I want them to be aware of why, what they did is good or not good, is to recognize, how am I going to approach this? And whether that's asking a good question. So, think about coaching. Are you asking a good question? If they're a lot younger and you want to tell them, you tell them what's right and wrong, as an example. And that creates curiosity in their minds, but also a behavior within them that starts to drive the type of, let's say, child that you want them to be at the beginning. It is a huge responsibility. No one's got a manual as a parent.
No.
And you will hear lots of advice, whether that's from aunts, uncles, parents, whoever it might be. They'll give you loads of advice, but every child is unique in their own way.
Yeah.
And we've got to nurture that, that talent, if you want to call it that, at the very beginning, to make them feel like, they can become the person that they want to be in this world, which is a fast-paced, changing world, and they have the resources to do it. And we're the ones who have to give them those resources at the beginning.
I never anticipated that the conversation would go down that journey, but the reality is, you have your own knowing versus doing, and then also the example you're setting for those that you are raising. And you, in theory, have a really wonderful power of helping influence positively that next generation through your children and changing certain ways of thinking and identities and behaviors to give them the better chance of believing in themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And, I'll add to this point, because I think it's very relative and important to add. So when I work with companies and organizations, I have a quote that I've been using for many years as well, is, what you accept is what you can expect.
Ooh.
Yeah. So what you accept is what you can expect.
Mm-hmm.
And if we allow something to happen, then we're creating the boundary where we can expect it to happen.
This is really painful, Ricky.
It can.
It's very painful.
So, and the second point is behind this is, well, if we want to see a behavioral shift in somebody else, we have to be the behavior that we want them to demonstrate. So we have to shift our behavior. So if you're hitting your head against a brick wall with somebody and they're not changing, again, everything's context dependent. You have to think, what behaviors can I shift? And if I change the way that I behave around this person, maybe it will open up avenues that they've not even considered, and their behavior will shift. So again, these are little nuggets, little, key points to consider. If you're listening to this as an example, you're hopefully thinking, well, let me just take down a few points. And you don't need to go through everything that we've covered. You could just go, right, okay, well, I like that statement. What I accept is what I can expect. So why don't I just think about my boundaries and what am I allowing into my circle and not allowing? And if my boundaries are holding me back from a being stuck perspective, well, why don't I start to shift my boundaries? It'll be uncomfortable. To shift the identity, because what if I accept more from a positive perspective, then those boundaries shift and I can expect more from myself. So it all comes back to that statement of, what you accept is what you can expect.
What is this one thing that you have seen that you believe people misunderstand about change within self, what would that one thing be?
That change is difficult.
Oh, okay.
I think
I love
there's that
that.
perception that people feel change is
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, it comes to the perception of change, right? So if we reframe that and say, well, change is not difficult, number one, change is inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a constant. If we look back at all the evidence of things that we've had to do to change, whether that's conscious or unconscious, we have been able to do it. We will find lots of evidence in our own experiences of things that we said that we couldn't do and have done when we're in difficult situations.
Yeah.
So we can leverage that and say, well, change isn't difficult. It's our ability to approach change that's more important. And that's where that behavioral shift takes place, because the second you stop saying it's difficult and start saying, I'm not going to focus on this big change and I'm going to focus on the small habitual shifts, that change doesn't feel as daunting. And that's what we need to focus on, the present, what we can do right now. Let's not worry too far ahead. We know where we want to go, but let's not focus too much on that. Let's start to think about what I need to do now. Let's not worry too much about what's happened in the past that hasn't worked, because that's now gone. I think it's a Les Brown quote. It might not be. Your past is a point of reference, not residence. And that's where you can look back and say, if things haven't gone well, we don't live there anymore. We look back, we take it as a point of reference, learn from it, but we can only focus on now. Because the only thing real is now, in this moment, which will shift in a moment. And that tells me that the only thing real is your behavior. So shift it now, move it and align it to where you want to go.
I think you just said something incredibly powerful within your answer there. Ultimately, we have obviously what we know and what we need to do. And I think the part of the big gap is the fact that we overthink the end result, which plays into knowing.
Yeah.
And actually, if we reduce the knowledge of the future or the past and just focused on what you can do right now in this minute, what's the one thing you can do to move forward towards that goal, then you're taking one big step closer to the doing.
Absolutely. How do you overcome procrastination is the question.
Yes.
Take action.
Literally.
It is literally take action.
Yes.
And it sounds really bizarre because procrastination is not a good or bad thing as well when you label it. Because if you're making a big life decision, then procrastinating over it is allowing you to think and overthink and think about what ifs, as an example, to really map out that big life decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's about procrastinating whether or not I should have something for dinner or go out or stay in and little things like that, and you recognize those patterns, then you might say, well, those procrastinating behaviors are not serving me. What I need to do in those moments is take action.
Yeah.
Just go and do it.
Just go and do it.
It's like a bit like a writer who has writer's block, gets a blank piece of paper and procrastinates about what should be the title, what should be the first opening paragraph, whatever it might be. And the action is just start writing.
My husband, so he uses the Mel Robbins 5-second rule to get himself out of bed. That's his biggest thing. And it's really funny, but it's really effective. It's literally 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 up. Yes. And he does it almost every day. Yeah. And it really works for him. And it doesn't have to be that technique in particular, but the technique of not overthinking how to stop procrastinating is ultimately what you're trying to do, isn't it? Is just take action now.
It is.
And for some people, they might be going, how do you do that?
If you look at that, which is a great technique, is if you think about that is a pattern interrupt. Because originally what you're doing is you're overthinking everything. And then what you're being offered there is a technique that says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you're using it, as we know, as a countdown.
Yeah.
It's pattern interrupt. And by the end of the one is you got to move. And the second you move, that motion creates the new emotion, which you've probably heard before. Again, and that allows you to break the pattern.
So I think, obviously who you surround yourself with is important. We know that because it actually plays a part in not only how you feel about yourself, but probably the decisions that you make, the guidance that you follow. We know that we can be stuck in a state of awareness and still be there for a very long time. But we also are now aware that we need to be shifting our behaviors and recognizing the identity that we're placing upon ourselves. There's a lot we can really consider. But if you were to narrow it down, if somebody listening right now knows that they need to do something, but they still haven't done it, what is the one thing that you would want them to take away from today?
I would say that if you're thinking about change and knowing what you want, maybe repeat the line in your head, which is the true measurement of change is a shift in behavior. So if we are, take everything we've said so far, if we are thinking about any goal or any habit that we want to form, we're only going to create that level of transformation or change through a shift in behavior.
Mm.
So recognizing that at any given moment, whether we're talking to ourselves in a certain way or we want to achieve something, shift your behavior. Just go do it. And that will allow you to start creating the desired outcome. So if there's anything you want to walk over, is the true measurement of change is a shift in behavior.
That's really helpful. And I think that's a really key thing for people to walk away with from this conversation. And is there anything else that you would like to add to this discussion that we've had today that you just think it would be really valuable for somebody listening to this, knowing the topic that we're focusing on? Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think if I was to leave one thing is don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like you try something and you go on a journey and it's not going as well as you might want it to go.
Yeah.
And we become so hard on ourselves and we're almost beating ourselves up about it. It's, it's like the analogy of somebody sitting on a sofa because, they've had a long, hard day. They've tried so hard and they feel a little bit burnt out. Yet they start becoming hard on themselves and saying, I'm lazy. And it's like that reframe in your mind to say, no, it's okay. It's all right. Let's not be hard on ourselves in a moment. We almost deserve to have some time to sit back, relax, and enjoy being lazy, if you want to call it that, to recharge our batteries, get the energy and go again. The sharpen the saw is
Yeah.
the analogy that you're probably even thinking of as I say it
Yeah,
to yourself.
literally.
So don't be so hard on yourself. Trust the process, take action, and enjoy the journey.
Ricky, thank you so much for your time today. I think for people who are interested in trying to drive action and just do what they need to do to be where they want to be, this has been really, really insightful. So I just want to say thank you so
The
much.
pleasure's been all mine.
It's been great. I love being in a room with you and I hope to have another conversation with you again in the
For sure.
future. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.